Hi, I'm Sean Bland at the Art Center of Wilmington Island. We are so glad to offer a way to stay connected and continue creating art. Check out our new list of art at home kits for both kids and adults, available for curbside pickup. Keep visiting our Facebook page and website to see the latest options. We will post them as quickly as we make them. Each kit contains everything you need to complete a painting at home: sketched canvas, an inspiration picture, paint brushes, and a palette, and a link to watch a tutorial to follow along. All you will need to provide would be paper towels and a rinse cup for brushes. Time to paint. Okay, as we begin our boat painting today, we're going to start in our background area to paint our sky, which is blue. So I am using a palette that has a blue, and it is the darker blue that you see here, which is ultramarine. I'm going to mix the ultramarine blue with white, and I'm going to make a sky color. You can mix as much or as little blue as you want to get the color that you like. This is almost a half and half with the blue and the white. I'm using a flat brush just to pull the strokes out across the edge of the canvas, going from the boat over to that space that you can see that just represents the sky. And I'm making sure that I fill in all my canvas spaces. So once I get that small area done, I'm going to move on over and get the area above the boat, and then move on towards the left side of the canvas. I can turn my flat brush on the toe side and just make a line, like an edge with the painting, with a paintbrush with a paint on it. And then I can just lay my brush down flat so that I am able to get the space filled in completely. Now, this sky is pretty flat, pretty simple. It just has one paint color basically that covers the whole space. You can be creative with it if you want to and put more clouds or anything else that you want in it, but it really doesn't need anything because you have so much interest in the boat itself that literally if you just took this one color blue and went across that whole space, you would be fine. But you also got a little aqua in your space on your palette, so if you wanted to add a little bit of that in and make it interesting with your color and with your brush stroke, you could certainly do that. So you get to make some decisions about how you paint your sky, but using this color and this brush, you can certainly get a nice looking sky area. And then we'll be ready to move on next to the water. Now, we're going to change the watercolor drastically so that you can tell the difference. So now that I've reached the line at the horizon, I'm going to change over, and this blue is going to be darker, and it's also going to be brighter. So this is the dark blue that you have on your palette, that you have in your kit. And so if I lay down my brush flat and go across, you can see that I can fill in all of that space. To get your flat brush to give you a line that you want, you need to choke up on it just a little bit so that you can carry it across and make it an even line. So you can certainly do that if you just choke up on your brush. Now, you do have to go over on this right-hand side just a little bit to put the edge where the water is so that you can get it in all the way across. Now, as you get to where the boat is, you know, the water's going behind it. So what you can do is just go right up to your line and then turn your brush on its side so that you can fill in that without actually going over your drawing. And then the space right up underneath it, it's about half and half. You've got the darker color on the top half, and then it changes over to the aqua color. And that color is beautiful, and it's very bright and looks beautiful against the boat color that you have. But if you pretty much use the aqua right out of the tube, it does look bright and very good with the blue color that you have. But in the middle, if they're both wet, you can just blend them out together so that you can tell that the water is darker in the background, and then it gets lighter and brighter as it comes up for the seashore. So that takes care of the blues and the greens for the water. So now I'm gonna rinse my brush and go over and start with the beach and paint the sand color. So I'm gonna use white with yellow ochre, and that's the golden yellow that you have on your palette. So I'm gonna go through and just mix the white with that color. And with the flat brush, if I lay it down flat, I can cover, a pretty big space using the width of the brush. When I get closer to the boat, if I don't want to overpaint the edges, I can just turn my brush on its toe like that and paint around it. But I don't mind overpainting because I can always just go back and when I get ready to paint on the boat, I can always extend those lines over to where they go. Now there is a line that comes across here that needs to be painted the darker color that comes down from the boat. So I'm just gonna go over, I'm gonna overpaint the lines just a little bit, but then I can paint that the darker brown as soon as I get my sand filled up. Now, the beachy area has a cast shadow that's coming from the boat, and so now I've reached that point. You'll see where that line is indicated. Sketch canvas is already done so that you can see where that shadow line is. Now this is the shadow for the line that's here, and this is the shadow for the boat that's here. And so once you get the yellow ochre and the white in, then you're gonna use just a little bit of the yellow ochre and brown, maybe to put a little area in here that looks like a rock. You can add that, and then you can just have some other marks out in, so the beach just isn't quite so clean looking if you want to spruce it up a little bit with some rocks or other things. But once you get that done, then all the rest of the area is going to be either a cast shadow or this line that's coming from the boat. So we'll do that now. We're going to change over, and it's really dark for the cast shadow, like right up underneath this area, and then it gets lighter in here. So in this part further out this way, I am just going to use the yellow ochre, and as I use the edge of or the toe of my brush to go in and sort of give, it's really a line for the cast shadow because you can actually see that line. I'm mixing the brown, which is the burnt sin. It's the light brown on your palette, and I'm using the edge of my brush, the toe, just to make the line so that you can literally see the edge of it. And then I'm going to use the whole width of the brush to go in and start filling in that space. Now, because you can see a lot of the sand in this area because it's very close up, you can see a little bit more of a discolorations between all the things that are actually laying on the beach. So I'm gonna go through and add more brown. I'm gonna add just a little bit of black in my brown to make it a value or two darker, a shade or two darker. My value's darker. So as I'm moving over and getting closer to the boat, I'm adding black into the brown. And you can see I just keep going and making it darker and darker. Now, because these lines are representing the sand, but in shadow, I'm using sort of a scrubby method like this, where I'm just scrubbing my brush right across the canvas. And that way, I'm getting the feel of it being rough and uneven. And of course, as I mentioned, it's getting darker and darker. So I just keep picking up different colors, brown, and then adding black to it, sometimes adding more yellow ochre to it. And I just keep moving towards the boat. And I'm using a very zigzaggedy kind of brush stroke and a rubbing brush stroke. I'm just scumbling right across the canvas to make the look that I'm after. I can also add the blue into the black right up against the edge, and you can see that even makes it look darker. So I added a little bit of blue to the black, and it really gave it an intensity and the look of it being a cast shadow. So that will basically finish up the spot that's underneath this left-hand side of the boat. And then we've got one on the right-hand side of the boat as well. So we need to make sure that we get that one put in. It's just a little, almost like a triangular shape that's under the boat on that right-hand side. But I just used black, and it did have some of the brown on it to get that done. Make sure that's a little on the curved side right here, so it feels like it is the bottom of, it's the edge of the bottom of that boat, so that you can see it. And then I'm gonna go ahead and get that line that is exactly the same color. I'm gonna use brown and black mixed together. And then I'll have that overlapping the sand for the beach area. And then we'll do the cast shadow for that. So I'm just using the toe of the brush. I'm just drawing pretty free-handed, just coming down the edge of it. I can barely see my line up underneath it, where I covered it up a little bit with the beach painting that I did, so it's fine. I know exactly where it is. So now I'm just using the toe of my brush again, going right up the edge, and I'm getting both sides in the width that I want them to be. And once I have that in, then I'm just laying my brush down a little bit more to fill in the middle section. And now I'm gonna add a little bit more of the brown and the yellow ochre to it, and I wanna come in and get my cast shadow. So once I do that on the bottom part, then I'm gonna add a little bit of the blue in with the black right across the top, and give it more of the cast shadow look with the blue and the black mixed together right up here, up underneath the edge of it. So the cast shadow gets a little bit darker as it goes from the inside of the shadow to the outside, and then it overlaps and runs right into the other cast shadow. There we go. So that pretty much finishes up our background space. You can easily go back as you're evaluating your canvas and evaluating the work that you have on your canvas, and see if there's anything else that you would like to do. If you want to make the beach lighter or wider, you could add white on. If you wanted more rocks, you could do that, more sand. If you wanted the edge to be crisper, you could always come in with the sand color and go right up against your line and clean that up if you needed to. So there's all kind of decisions you can make about what you have. And once you are satisfied with that, then you can move to actually painting the boat itself. So we're gonna, since we have the white in from our sand and the yellow ochre, I'm just gonna start with that color, and we're gonna come into this middle big section right here that's on the boat. It's white, but it's a white that has been really bleached out because of the sun, and washed out because of the water. So it's definitely not a clean white. So that's perfect. I rinsed off my brush just a little bit while ago, but you can see I'm still dragging around some of the blacks and blues and browns and golds that were in there. So it's not white. So I'm picking that up and doing it on both sides, so that you can see that now all that space is filled in. Now, right up underneath the line where this section overlaps this section, it is a lot darker. So I'm gonna go back in and pick up the darker color. I'm using the toe of my brush just to go right up underneath that line and just make it darker all the way across. And I'm doing it on both sides. And once I lay that down, what I can do is now come back and I can bring it from underneath the ledge out and just blend it. So every once in a while, I just take and push the darker paint into the lighter paint, and it gets a light blend if you do it while it's still wet. And then it can look like it's just a little bit of a shadow that's right up underneath it. But I'm doing using the whole width of the brush just to go in and push those two colors just a little bit and blend them together. I want it to be a little bit more used looking or worn out looking, so I'm gonna take a combination of the yellow ochres and browns and maybe even some of the black, and I'm gonna go in and lay my brush flat against the canvas and just scrub, just lay down some of those colors just to distress and make the boat look older. Now I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna do the same thing with brown to make the bottom part of the boat. This is burnt sienna. I'm gonna just use the whole width of the brush just to fill in the basic shape. But what I'm gonna do is as I paint that in, I'm gonna add other colors. I'm gonna add black and white and a combination like that grayish color. And then all of that'll really stand out right against the contrast right against this white part of the boat. So burnt sienna, just laying my brush on its side and just scrubbing all those colors in. I'm leaving that little bit of area right there where you can see the white part that's on the boat that's probably stuff that's attached itself to the boat in its wear and tear. I'm gonna come on in right up underneath it and then finish it up with the burnt sienna. And then I'm gonna do all the stressing on the boat with different colors right on top of it. So that's what I'll do now. I'm gonna pick up some of the black. I'm gonna make the bottom part of the boat down here a little bit darker, as if it were going up inside, which it is. So this area just gets darker. You can still see the brown and you can still see it's the edge of the boat, but it's definitely tucked up underneath. And then I'll take that same black color, add a little white to it so it is grayish, and I'm gonna lay my brush on its side, and literally I'm just gonna go in and lay those colors in and just scrub right across it, just like the water scrubs right across the paint on the boat and literally scuffs it. So I'm doing the same thing. Now, the area in here where the boat has probably a white stripe on it, I'm gonna pick up white, but I'm keeping all the distress colors on there, and I'm just pushing that in just a little bit so it's a little bit lighter, but it's not a defined line because it's just about worn off the boat. So I'm just taking my brush, laying in some of the white, and just making the shape a little bit on the side of it being curved, and then going right down to the middle of the boat. So this is like an arrow shape, kind of going right into the center. The last thing we'll do is we'll come in and make the big part that's on the front of the boat stand out. So let's go up under here now and paint a little bit more of the trim work. It is mostly white here. It is mostly yellow ochre up here. And then in this area, it's sort of a combination of both because it's a little bit on the dirty side, of course. So I'm gonna pick yellow ochre. I'll put some here. I'll be adding a little yellow ochre here. And then I'll be adding a little bit of the yellow ochre in this side. This is big, this is medium, and this is sort of small. So to get the small edging in the molding, I'll actually just come in and use more of a controlled brush technique where I choke up on the brush, and that way I can get right in the space where I want it to go. It is a very loose painting, there's not a lot of detail, but if I want to go just in that space and show that that is molding right on the edge, then I can use the line of my brush to get that worked out. So all three of those are basically the same, they're just different widths. So this one is a little bit wider than the first one that I just did. So I'm just using my brush sideways and going right across and painting that section as well. And then I'm coming across and I'm doing it again in this area. And this time you can see it's a little bit thicker over here. So I have added trim on two sides, and now I've got a third one right up here on the top. So I'm putting that color a little bit darker, so I added some black and some brown to this section. So I am saving a little place where my rope is going to be tied around it, so I'll be adding that last, right on top of the boat after I finish it. So I'm going to do one side, and then I'll go do this other side. Remember, both of those are basically the same thing. So I'm using the same colors on both sides. This is a little bit more distressed, so I'll come back and add more colors as I do that. But each one of the colors, I haven't really cleaned off my brush very much because I do want them to be distressed, and an easy way to do that is just to layer the colors on your brush. Like right now I'm going to put black and brown and yellow ochre. I have all of those, and then as I paint, all the colors come right out of the brush, and you can almost see the separation of the colors, and that's a good, fun, interesting way to get the colors on there and have that distressed look of having sort of a layered look where maybe even the paint's rolled off on some of the colors. So after I get that brown area done, then I'm ready to do the blues that I can see at the top section. So I am gonna wash off the brush now and get a lot of the brown off of it. And I'm gonna go and get the turquoise green and the blue. I'm gonna actually mix those two colors together. And that'll be the basic color that I'm gonna use for this. And I'm gonna paint them almost like they're two different stripes. And then I'm gonna go through and I'm going to distress them as well so that they look old and worn out just like the other part of the boat does. I'm gonna save my placement for where the rope comes and overlaps, but I'm gonna be painting the rope right on top of this boat space in a minute. So to go in, I can turn my brush sideways to tweak down in that little space, but you do have a small little round detail brush, so while you're painting, if you feel like that this flat brush is too big, of course you can change over. I do like to use more or less an oversized brush to paint my first like underpainting with, like I'm doing now. It's just an underpainting, and then if I need more paint, it's easy just to go right back on top, and I can use the smaller brush to accent some areas if I need them to have specific detail there. So there's one stripe painted in, and now there'll be another one. So I'm putting that one right on top, and I'm overlapping the brown area just a little bit. I'm giving myself just a little bit of space so I know where the rope is. And then I'm just laying my brush sideways, flat right on the canvas to go ahead and fill in that space. I'm gonna pick more of the aqua color on this side. We're going like the light's coming in from this area. So this is the light side, and that's a little bit darker. when I get ready just to fill in the big spaces, I'm gonna just take my brush and lay it down flat. That's just really for coverage. If you don't care too much about the underpainting, then you can just have all your fun little strokes going in at the same time. But if we do the underpainting like this, then it's really fun to go back and do the stresses of the different colors right on top of it. So that's what I want to do now. I actually want to go up in and make each one of the layers show that that is overlapping, that you can see that cast shadow up underneath. So I'm going to turn the toe of my brush with actually black and blue on it, and I'm going to go right up underneath this area and just lay in that line. It's a shadow that's right up underneath that area. And I'm going to do that over and over again until you can feel the depth in the boat coming out. In this side, I'll do that. I'll just lay down the toe of my brush right up underneath that molding, and you can just see how it comes out. Now, all this is like a shadow up underneath that area because the overhang is there and the rope is there, so it really has two shadows. This shadow actually has like a corner that's in shadow, so we'll actually darken that one as well. Then we'll come in and go to the middle area where you can see that that's divided into two sections on both sides, and we can put that line in. You probably painted over that. If not, you can see where your line is, but if you did paint over it, you can tell it really starts right here on the edge of where this line is that we painted in first, so it'll be easy for you to locate it if you painted over it. So now I'm just going to use the toe of the brush to come in and get the edging done that is between the blue boards and the trim work. So I will lay those dark lines in. And then now I have the darker color on my brush, so I'm going to actually do some scrubbing with that to lay in some of the discoloration so it looks old. So that's one way with the black and the brown, just to do some scuffing right across the boat. And you can make some decisions about how much of that you want, of course, while you're painting. I'd like to come back in and put a little bit, that's more of the black, I'd like to put a little bit of the yellow ochre, just a little bit of it, just scraped right across the top so that you can see that. Scrape a little bit more, just lay it on. Don't mix it, just lay it on and put the brush down. Lay it and put it down. Pick it, load the brush, lay it on the canvas, but don't mix it, just lay it, barely touch the canvas, just lay it. Barely touch it. That's so important. We're going to do a little bit more of that with the brown coming down like this. So I'm picking up the brown color. I'm going right on top of that light color and just giving it the idea that it's round by adding these lines that curve down. I'm going darker on the edge of the boat and then getting lighter towards the middle. That helps curve the boat out too. And using the toe of the brush, I can add a little bit more of the dark up here, and then I can just push it down with my brush so that you can see it's a little bit more of a shadow than I did the first time because the paint was still wet. So now that it's dry, I can easily get it on top of the white and it won't blend into it very much. So every once in a while, if you are going to do a lay-on where you're scrubbing it to make it look worn out or darker, you have to wait till it dries a little bit because you don't want it to blend. You want it to lay right on top. So that's what I'm doing with this area in here now. So that's why I mentioned that about the underpainting. You have that brown that's under everything else, and then you just come back and you can have fun scrubbing in these colors. But it is better if you wait 3 or 4 minutes until this is dry to scrub that right on top of it. It just gives you a better feeling. It doesn't blend, it just lays right on top. Okay, so now we're gonna go over and we're gonna paint, the brown part of the boat that's in the front, this front post. You do have some marks that, show where the brown has been, bumped off or worn off. I'm not gonna worry about that, I'm just gonna paint it, basically brown. I'm gonna add a little white to it just to make it a little bit lighter. And then I'll actually come in and do the scuffing just like I did on, the rest of the boat. But I'm just laying my brush pretty much like at a 45, just laying it in and, scrubbing in the paint. So I've got brown in some places, a little lighter with white mixed in other places. And then I'll do some, scrubbing in with some blue and black and, letting it turn a little on the gray side in some places. I'm saving the area for the, rope right there, just very, small thin edge that I can, see, so I'll know where it goes. But, not worried about painting over the lines. So, brown and white, and continue going all the way down, and then I have that space filled in. I'm gonna lighten up with white as I come in this area so that you can see the light brown against the, darker brown. And I'm still just laying down the toe of the brush on its side so that you can get, very, uneven lines that don't really have an edge on them. And that's what we're looking for, in this kind of painting. So, now I'll add a little bit more of the distress by putting black on my brush. Black with the white on it gives it sort of a gray look, so I can come in. And I'm just gonna lay the brush on its side and really just sort of draw in some areas that show, the scuff marks in a little bit. And then I can also add some of the blue and, pick that up just a little bit so it's reflective probably from the sun, from the boat, or even from the water. But, now I'm gonna wash out my brush and go for, the rope. And I'm gonna, just put this brush aside after I've washed it and dried it so that I can come in and get the round brush that you have. And what I'd like for you to do is to paint your rope. So if you dip your brush in water first and then go over and pick up the burnt sienna, add white to it, add a little yellow ochre to it. I have all three of those colors on my brush now. So what I'll do is go in and just barely touch with the tip. And the way to do that is to choke up on your brush, go all the way down to the metal handle part and hold it. And then as you begin to paint, you can actually use your wrist to paint, and you can get a very detailed line with that round brush if you just touch the tip of the brush. If you press down with the point, then you're gonna get a line that's too wide, and you don't want a wide line. So make sure that when you go over and pick up your paint, you roll your brush into the paint, and you just use the tip of it, just the tip. And because you're using such a small amount of paint, you have to continue to reload your brush over and over. So I'm dipping in the black, I'm dipping in the water, dipping in the black, rolling it so that I have a nice point, and then I'm drawing with the point to make a edge. And in this case, it's a rope edge, but you can see the edges of it. They stand out. It is darker on both sides of the edge, and then it gets lighter in the center. So that's the way we're going to paint it. I'm gonna do the same thing at the top. I'm going up above. Now remember, the light's coming in on this side, so that means it's darker over here on the right-hand side. So with my black, I'll draw the line on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side, I will use the brown and the white. And that will show up being lighter, and it as like it's, it has a highlight on it. So, black on one side and then the white and brown coming in on the other side. And of course, the rope is looped around here. We'll make our loop in just a second, but we're gonna go ahead and finish this part first. The white or the light is coming in across the top of it, so I'm gonna dip into the white just a little bit, and I'm just getting it on the tip of the brush so that I can go in and go around the boat and go up and then go behind the boat, because we want this to look like that the rope is inside or behind this main center part of the boat where we paint it brown. So with the white coming in and going around, and then the light coming in, I'm adding more of the yellow ochre and the brown. So just the thin part of the brush, barely touch the canvas so I can get color on there, but it's very thin. If you happen to paint too thick, you can always go back and clean that up with a couple of different ways. You can do a shadow edge, which this brush needs on both sides, so I'm picking up a little black. I'm going right up underneath the rope, so it looks like it's actually laying there. See how nice the black just laid in right behind the white? And then because of the way the sun's hitting it, it actually has the black on both sides, and then the rope will definitely look like it is round. So if I go on both sides of the rope and pretty much outline the edge, you can tell that it's just laying right in that space without any doubt, because of the shadow line going all the way around it. Then we want to make sure we get this little loop in here. It's like it's tied in a knot. So the first thing we're going to do is take the brown and the yellow ochre, and we're going to make the rope come in right on top, and then we're going to make a loop. So we're going to take the burnt sienna, we're going to go in and we're going to actually draw a loop, and you can't really see it very much now, but when we put that black shadow underneath it, you'll be able to see it. We've got another loop, so we've got 2 so far, and then we've got another small loop that's on the end. I'm just taking the brush and dipping it in the paint right on the very tip of it. I'm not carrying much paint because it is very small, the knots are small, and I'm just picking up enough black that I can literally shape the shadow part first, and then I can go right back in after I shape the dark black and then put a little bit of the light highlight on the top. So now I have loop, loop, and loop. I have a knot, several of them, all looped together down on the bottom end. I started off making it light brown first. I went in and just made, they're really like ovals, and I made them with brown first. And then after I made them with brown, I took the black and went around them so that I could see the edges on the shadow side. And then now I'm going to go lighter so that I can see the highlight on the top side. So once I wash my brush out a little bit, I'm going to go in and get the white with a little yellow ochre. And then I'm going to identify that a little bit more so that it's easy to see that it's a knot. So I'm going to go in and just barely touch the tip of the brush, barely touch it, right where I see the light hitting right in the center of each one of the knots. So this is one of them, and this is another one. And then I've actually got another knot here, a little white, just to show off the knot, just a little. But as long as you have you start with the medium color, put that in, then you add the dark color on the back side of it, and then you go in and put the light right in the middle of it. Then you can tell that you have the knot, and you can tell that each little section is working together to create that rope. I'm going to put a little bit more highlight right in the center of the rope here that I painted a while ago. We put the same thing we did, light in the middle, and then we put black on both sides. So now I'm putting just a little highlight in there, just to make it stand out a little bit more. So now that you have the basic part of the boat, you can just go in and play with different areas that you can make a little bit more old looking or worn out looking, or you can add just your own little brush strokes to it. I'm going to bring in a little bit more of a white in here in the corner up at the top and make it look a little more worn out. I'm going to do the same thing down here at the bottom, because I really want that white to come out in this area and stand out right in front of the boat. And so if I lighten it up, then it comes out. I'm just using the very tip of the brush so that I can make the white. I'm not covering up the brown that's underneath it. I'm just very lightly, very delicately, with just the point of the brush going in and just making a highlight that comes right in on the front where the light is really hitting it. Then I'm going to add a few more scuff marks. This is the white. So I'm just scuffing right across the top of that white so that you can see that area a little bit more. Now I'm coming in with the white and I'm going back. This is the opposite. While ago I scuffed it with brown, and now I'm scuffing it with a little white. So I have both looks coming in. And so now the white looks like it's scuffed even more. And I'm going to go now, add a few more highlights to the rope that's coming in here, so it looks like the sun is catching it as it turns and goes around this end of the boat. And then I'm just looking at my moldings at my edges on the boat to see if they need anything else. I'm putting a little bit, I'm just turning my brush with a little white on it and scuffing some white right in the center. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of a white streak that comes up underneath the boat so that you can tell where the edge of it is. And then I'm going to go in and wash my brush, and I'm gonna add black and blue right up underneath, and really make sure that I push that dark up under the boat. It feels like that it needs to be a little bit darker since we have this brown in. I feel like that I can darken that cast shadow a little bit more with the blue and the black. And that's something that's just really hard to tell when you're putting the cast shadow in up underneath a white object, which at that time happened to be the boat that wasn't painted. So now that the boat is painted, I can come in and make sure now that my dark is dark enough, because now I can see the difference between the boat and the shadow. So doing the same thing on both sides, very dark, and that's just what I needed up underneath there. This, I think, could do the same thing, go a little bit darker, so I'm just using the whole, since now I have the small detail brush, I can just come in and darken the pole that's coming up this way, like that, and that really makes that stand out. Before, when I had the bigger brush, I didn't do my little details, but now they're real easy to do. And I've got a little point on the end of my brush, so I can go in and do the same thing here. I can line up this edge if I want to, and I can pull shadows up here, and I can pull shadows here. So now on both sides of the brown, I have a darker shadow right on the boat that shows that this brown is in front of the blue, and it really stands out now, so that you can see that the front is in the front and this is going further back, and then this is even further back that way because it's bigger and it gets smaller. So now we've used a lot of our design principles to create our painting. It's been a great experience working on this picture, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I have. And now when you finish your project, I want to see your masterpiece. So please send it to us on our email at artcenterofwilmingtonisland@gmail.com or post it on our Facebook page. And then keep visiting our Facebook page and our website to see the latest Art at Home kits that we have available. Thanks so much for supporting your neighborhood art studio.